I'm Nick Allmeyer, linkinglewiscounty.com. Here today with Lewis County Manager Ryan Piche. And a lot of you might remember pre-pandemic, we used to do a monthly segment kind of before the board meeting, previewing what was coming up for the Lewis County Board of Legislators meeting. So Ryan, you and I discussed it not too long ago. That's something that we would like to bring back again for transparency and things like that. So here we are. We have a board meeting coming up tomorrow on February 6th. So we're here to discuss the February 6th Lewis County Board of Legislators meeting. So just to jump right into it, I don't want this to sound, what's the word I'm looking for? Basically, it's a little bit of a light agenda this month. It's the beginning of the year. Yep. We kind of have a new board in place, so kind of easing into things a little bit slowly. So there's not a huge amount of stuff going on at the board meeting coming up tomorrow, but there is a public hearing. So can you tell people what the public hearing is going to be about?
Yeah, so communities throughout Lewis County are eligible for CDBG funds, which are federal funds. They're Community Development Block Grant funds. Basically, we have one public hearing at the beginning of the year that kind of announces our eligibility for those funds and allows us to apply to tap into that throughout the year. So kind of a formality at the beginning of the year.
Okay, so that public hearing will be it'll open at the beginning of the meeting tomorrow night at 5 p.m. right here in the second floor at the courthouse. So anybody that has any questions or comments for the community development block grants, they can come and speak their piece then.
Yep, some of the grants are for things like housing that run through Snowbelt. So there's all kinds of housing programs that we run through Snowbelt. There's also infrastructure programs that we help the towns and villages with. So all kinds of different
small business, micro
small business loans. Yep, absolutely. Lots of CDBG funds that flow through Lewis County.
All right, perfect. Okay, and getting into the resolutions, like we said, there's it's not heavy on resolutions this month, but there are a couple worth discussion. So one of the first ones is this is a resolution basically supporting a bill that's in both the Assembly and the Senate in New York State for firefighters and EMS services. Yeah. So I know it works closely in some recommendations you got through your county ad hoc committee for EMS services. So can you explain people a little bit what this is and why the county is supportive of the state passing it?
So the county has been focused on rural emergency medical services, EMS services, for some time now. The previous board last year, 2 years ago, set up an ad hoc committee to study the issue in Lewis County. We have fewer EMS and EMT providers in Lewis County than we did 10 years ago, and our response times are not always as strong as they used to be. This is an issue that is rural communities across New York State are facing. And so we're happy that the state is starting to pay attention. The State Association of Counties has put out a list of recommended actions, and a lot of that overlaps with the list of initiatives that we put together. So one of the bills that will be moving forward in Albany is a bill to allow volunteer firefighters and EMS service providers to receive a small stipend. So part of the issue with EMS providers is it is a lot of work. It's a lot of time out of their day just to keep their certifications going and to log all of the patient data that the state requires. It's more demanding than ever. And so if we could offer them, a small stipend to offset the amount of time that they have to put in still as volunteers, but a small stipend to kind of offset their gas or to offset, the time and energy they have to put into their continuing education credits, stuff like that. So if the state would allow us to provide volunteers with a small stipend, we think it might be a good initiative to help retain some of those volunteers in Lewis County.
Right. So a couple of important points. I think you mentioned before, Lewis County and other small rural communities are 100% dependent on volunteers for EMS and fire services.
Yes.
The reason this law is needed from the perspective of smaller rural communities is that with volunteers, if you start giving them stipends the way that things are set up now, they're no longer volunteers. They actually have to become an employee of the county or whatever municipality is
A
supporting.
lot of rural counties have basically moved away from their volunteer-based system and set up county-based, full-time paid EMS
Right.
providers.
Larger rural county.
Right.
Right.
But that's not something that, we want to go towards. We want to continue to support
Right.
our volunteer network. We think, that's the best way forward, is to try to keep those volunteers engaged and active.
Right.
But in order to do that, we do recognize that, some amount of money to offset their costs and,
Right.
and the amount of personal, their own time and money that they put into it.
Right.
If we could offset that. So what we're asking the state to do is we're asking the state to support a bill that's already on the floor in the Senate and the Assembly. We're asking them to pass that bill, and the legislators, if they agree to move forward with this, would be saying we support this initiative.
Okay. And basically what this bill specifically does, though, it would allow them to still be volunteers,
Yes.
but to receive a stipend.
Correct.
At
Yep.
the same time.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so one of the other resolutions that looks like will be coming up at tomorrow's board meeting are, just trying to see which other one we wanted to talk about a little bit here. I think you were going to explain a little bit about the highway purchases. So something that was approved last year, but kind of a new way to save taxpayers a little bit of money on
Sure.
purchasing big machinery.
So there's a resolution in the packet to purchase some machinery for 2024 for the Highway Department. Those purchases were already approved in the 2024 capital budget, which got adopted back in November. But this year, what we're doing a little bit different is we're going to finance that equipment in-house. So in the past, we have financed it through short-term lending through like a local bank. But we have enough in our own savings account right now that basically we can self-finance and save ourselves those interest fees. So that's what that resolution does.
So if the legislators approve and move forward with this resolution, basically it'll just be self-loaning for the equipment purchases over the next couple of years, and then you don't have to pay interest payments and
Correct.
bond payments.
Everything in government is set up with fund accounting. There's different
Right.
funds. So we've got a machinery fund, and we've got, of course, the general fund, which is the largest
Right.
fund. What we're doing is we're having the general fund loan money to the machinery fund rather than having the machinery fund go to a bank, basically.
Gotcha. Yep, that makes sense. All right, and I think the the other big topic that we wanted to talk about today that we kind of touched on in the beginning, maybe that would have been a better time to address these, but I know there's the 3 standing committees of the Board of Legislators that meet on the 3rd Tuesday of every month.
Yep.
Basically, that's kind of where the work is done to bring forward resolutions to the entire board. So
I think that's an important point. Folks, I think sometimes just watch our board meetings and they think, boy, that went fast, and they didn't really discuss much. That's because we've already discussed all these resolutions multiple times through the
Right.
committee structure, okay?
Okay.
So, there's videos of our committee meetings. If people are interested in kind of the nuts and bolts of government and where some of these resolutions originate from, you really need to watch our committee meetings.
Okay. And each committee is generally roughly, I mean, give or take a little bit, but roughly about an hour.
Yep.
And there's 3 committees, and they
Yep.
meet every month. So do you want to, maybe a good point to start would be with what are the 3 committees of the...
So we have 10 legislators, and that board, the Board of Legislators, meets once a month. Then, like Nick said, we have 3 subcommittees that have 5 legislators each. Obviously, some of them are on 2 committees. And those committees are the General Services Committee, that covers your highway department, emergency management, general government services and operations. Then you've got the Human Services Committee, which covers basically all of the human services that the county provides. Your social services, Office for the Aging, even probation and the sheriff's office, who work with the more human element in the community. Lewis County Health System falls under the Human Services Committee. And then Finance and Rules Committee, which handles the finances and kind of other big picture economic development type things for the community. So that's how we kind of divide up the operations of the county government, and we feed those issues and initiatives through each of those committees. Then it goes to the full board for adoption.
Okay. So, and that's a good clarification point too, that, sometimes some people are aware of the committee meetings and might see something happen in a committee meeting and think that's the, that's the law now, or this has been adopted. But basically, anytime something is approved and moved forward in a committee, all that's doing is moving it to the full board for approval.
Correct. It's
And
just
the
the same.
committee attaches a recommendation to it.
Absolutely.
Usually. Yep.
And we have had legislation that moves forward out of a committee that will have a positive recommendation, and we've had legislation move out of a committee that has a negative recommendation.
Right.
So, it's not always necessarily the same. But I would note that this is exactly how other government entities do
Right.
business.
Right.
So in Lewis County, we've got a lot of very small towns and villages that probably just operate everything as a committee of the whole.
Right.
Everybody discusses everything.
Right.
That is not the case when you get into county level, certainly not state level or national.
Right.
There's dozens and dozens of state and federal committees.
Right.
We're just not that big of a county, so 3
Right.
committees. And then the ad hocs that we create, like
For special
EMS or
issues.
broadband, those types
Yep.
of things. But for the most part, we can get our business done in 3 committees.
Very good. Okay, so at the new board is already convened. Obviously, they held their January regular meeting, which was basically just a procedural meeting, assigning members to committees, things like that. And then they did meet for their committee meetings in January, at the end of January. So
Yep.
at that time, each committee kind of adopted their goals for the year that are going to be presented to the full board tomorrow night.
Correct.
So
Yep.
do you want to go through each of the committees and kind
Sure.
of focus in on what their focus is this
Sure.
year?
So the committee goals are, they come from staff and the legislators,
Okay.
right? So, staff have things that they might need to accomplish throughout the year. Those things need to come up through the legislators and have their support.
Right.
There's also things that the legislators want to accomplish that they are going to need staff to buy in and support as well.
Right.
So we start the committee goal process actually back in December. By then we knew who the new legislators were going to be. We met with our staff and asked them to come up with some draft goals, and we asked the legislators to come up with some draft goals. Then we brought those to the January board meeting. So when everyone got sworn in, they were handed a draft of goals. We then met with the legislators again to go through what their values are, what they want to see. And then this draft list here went to the committee meeting in January, and now, like we said, it's been adopted by the committees. It's going to the full board for adoption. So the first committee is General Services Committee, and here are the 9 items that the legislators have decided that they would like to focus on in 2024. The first is, like we just discussed, Nick, continue with the EMS ad hoc committee and help launch the BOCES EMS program. So there's still a lot of work that needs to be done on rural EMS in Lewis County. And we want to continue to work on that. Last year we spent $300,000 sending money out to the ambulances and the EMS departments in Lewis County to help them with their capital funding. And we also gave $80,000 to BOCES to help them launch a EMS program for juniors. Okay, so those were 2 initiatives that came out of that ad hoc committee. We've got more work that we want to do, and we want to make sure that BOCES program gets off the ground.
Right.
The second thing is execute courthouse renovation project. So this is our last building here that really hasn't been addressed in terms of capital needs, and it's not a major renovation, but we've got some HVAC concerns in this building. You've got radiators that are from the 1940s, you've got a boiler that's from the early 90s, and you've got a rooftop unit from the mid-2000s.
Right.
Those 3 elements aren't always working together efficiently, and not only that, but we've had some failure on some of those items throughout the year. So that's probably a 2 to 3 year process of narrowing in on what needs to be done and making those fixes.
And now that some of the other projects are getting complete, you've got some departments are moving out of the
Yes.
building, and so it's kind of like a space reallocation as well.
Yeah, we've had folks in the basement of this building
Right.
for some time now, and luckily we've been able to get a lot of them out. But we really need to think about the basement space as more for storage and mechanical, and not really office space. It's not
Right.
good office space for
Right.
for anybody. So. The next thing is, obviously we want to complete the existing projects that we have. We're on schedule to have those existing projects, the final buildings complete in March. And then some paving in April, but those should be done, and then we'll be wrapped up with that, which has been about a 2-year project. Open Singing Waters Park, we've got just a little bit more work to do out there for the new bathhouse and a well, so that there's water there at the bathhouse. Some work in the spring, and then we'll open that for the summer. Develop a Rails to Trails master plan with active public input and engagement. So that's something that we've been working on. We've hired Alta, which is a planning and design group that's going to help us with some of this stuff. I know people are very eager to hear more about what's happening with the Rails to Trails program. We are a bit in limbo at the moment because we're waiting for the federal government to approve the purchase. Okay, so as soon as we have that, then we can start being a lot more open with timelines and those types of things. Without knowing those details, it's hard for us to we really don't have much to communicate right now. That's the God's honest truth, is we're waiting for the federal government approval. Once we have that, then we can really start moving on some of this stuff. Right.
And just to update for people that might not be familiar, the basically where things are stuck at right now is in the whole abandonment process.
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
So there's basically speaking of committees and boards and things like that, there's a board at the federal government level that basically their responsibility is to, determine before a railroad is abandoned, does it, check all the boxes, blah, blah, blah. So that's the process we're in right now, and, just a little bit of a hang up at the moment.
And to be clear, the county is not controlling that process.
Right.
The sellers, GVT, Genesee Valley Transportation, have applied to the federal government, the Surface Transportation Board, for abandonment. The county is not even really a party to that.
Right.
So obviously we have an interest in keeping it moving forward, but that's between two non-county entities.
Right.
So we are really kind of just waiting at this point.
So GVT needs that abandonment waiver in order to move forward to the sale to the county.
Yes.
Right.
Yep. And really the federal government's job here is to make sure that taking up this rail would not impact national defense or interstate commerce.
Right.
Two things which we feel fairly confident would not be affected.
Right.
So. Okay. The next one of our goals for General Services Committee is to execute the Glenfield Complete Streets project. That's a highway project that's going through Main Street, Glenfield. Usually for the past many years, if we have a county road that goes through the middle of a village or hamlet, we just focus on the road and the pavement.
Right.
But that's not really the best way to go about things, because the road and the pavement also interact with storm drainage. And in order to have effective storm drainage, you've got to have proper catch basins and culverts and curbs.
Right.
And in order to have proper catch basins and culverts and curbs, you might in some cases need to reduce the base in some areas.
Right.
So our goal now, we're going to try it here in Glenfield and hopefully continue it for a few years, is when we take a county road through a community, we're going to basically redo every aspect of that road, and in this case including sidewalks as well.
Right. And they're really, thinking about it off the top of my head, there's probably not a whole lot of communities that the county road is the main street through the community. Usually it's a state road.
Most of the time it's a state road, but you've got Turin, Beaver Falls, Port Leyden, and Seaville as well. So there are some that we do have a road that goes right through the middle of a community.
So other communities might be a future.
Yes, Turin I think is what we're looking at next, because they've got a grant to redo their water infrastructure. Right. So we know that if we redo the street there, the street's not going to be torn up a year later for new water lines. So that might be the.
But I think in like last year or something, funding's already been received for the Glenfield Complete Street project. So this is just the goal for this year, is to move the project forward and complete it.
Yep. Yep. And that construction should be happening this summer, and in fact we will have a presentation on that at the February committee meeting.
Okay, perfect.
The next goal is to review and revise the junkyard local law. That's something that the Board of Legislators has taken up every few years, and just continue to tweak and revise that local law. But all junkyard administration and licensing runs through the county. So
Okay.
we continue to want to refine that.
Right.
And then last is study strategies to maximize state and federal funding for highway infrastructure. There's a lot of ways that we can maximize more revenue coming in from the state and federal government, and we need to work with our towns and villages on that. So we've been helping with a lot of bridge applications. When I first started here, the county would do one bridge per year. We have this year in 2024 6 bridges funded by the state.
Right.
Okay, that's because the county has started helping the towns and villages with their bridge administration,
Okay.
which is something that we had not previously done.
And they're actually, I think we didn't really discuss it that much because it's kind of just run-of-the-mill business, but there is a resolution coming up tomorrow night for one of these bridge projects, and like you said, it's just an agreement between the county and whatever municipality the bridge, so the county's helping them acquire the funding and doing the design phase of the bridge.
Yep, so far we've helped the town of Watson, the town of New Bremen, the town of Lionsdale, so town of Denmark. We've done some good work trying to get these towns funded, whereas they were unable to get funding in the past. So something to continue to work on. One thing that I should have noted here is that, and so those are our goals for the General Services Committee, but I should have noted from the beginning that the General Services Committee is chaired by Legislator Morahan from Watson.
Okay.
The vice chair is Josh Lebeker from Turin, and the other legislators on the committee are Herb Frost, Tom Calamus, and Jeff Nellenbeck. So
Okay.
that is the group of legislators that are going to be working on those general
General
services
service
goals.
issues. Yep.
So for the Human Services Committee, the chairman of that committee is Jessica Mosier from Denmark, and the vice chair is Tom Calamus from Krogan. The other legislators are Josh Lebeker, Vincent Nortz, and Barry Leindecker, and they are the Human Services Committee.
Okay.
And the Human Services Committee are going to work on these goals. So the first goal is to continue to expand child care initiatives.
Okay.
We received a grant last year from the Northern Border Regional Commission to help fund child care in schools. So the Harrisville School and the South Louis School will be moving forward with those 2 initiatives that were really because the county helped write a grant for that. Also, we've got agreements with the Child Advocacy CAPC in Watertown, and they're going to be here at our DSS twice a week, helping enroll people in for the state subsidized childcare. So there's a lot of initiatives going on, and the committee wants to continue to push that forward.
Okay.
Another goal is to continue to support the Public Health's Community Health Improvement Plan. Lewis County continues to rank quite poorly in health outcomes in many categories, particularly around obesity and chronic disease like diabetes and heart disease. We also unfortunately rank quite poorly when it comes to suicides per capita. So a lot of work to be done there on improving health outcomes. And so public health obviously has a big plan, the Community Health Improvement Plan, that they're going to be working on throughout the year, and this committee is going to help support that. The third goal is to continue to discuss recreation patrol. Like I said before, the Sheriff's Department is a human service as well. They're under this committee. It's something that the sheriff and the legislators have been very interested in over the last several years, is recreation patrol and how we're keeping people safe when they recreate in our community. The next goal is to review the jail and medical contracts. At this point, this is relatively technical, but the jail inmates are served by several overlapping medical contracts.
Right.
And it's getting pretty expensive, especially with the addition of medication-assisted treatment last year, which is a state mandate to provide opioid addiction treatment in every jail in New York State. So some counties, like Jefferson County next door, have gone to an all-encompassing one contract to cover all health needs of the inmates. We'd like to explore that and see if that's something that could work here as well.
Okay.
The next goal is to support employee wellness initiatives. A big cost to both the employees and the county are health insurance premiums.
Right.
The best way to control health insurance costs in the long run is to make sure that people are well and that they're not needing to utilize as much health care. So investing in wellness and pushing that forward is something that's important. Next is obviously probably the biggest one, these aren't in any particular order, but complete the renovation project at Lewis County Health System. So the new operating room is open. The new operating rooms are open. The pavilion is up and running. They're still renovating some other patient rooms, and then there's the renovation of the old operating room as well. So that's something that we keep a close eye on, obviously with our partners at the hospital. And then lastly, but certainly not least, reopen maternity services at Lewis County Health System. That's been something that's been on this committee's radar really since that service was put on pause a few years ago. Right. So they've been working hard with that.
That looks like it's still up on track to
yes,
launch
mid-March. Mid-March, yep, as we are on track for that. So that's the Human Services Committee. The Finance and Rules Committee is our third and final committee. That is chaired by Tom Osborne, who is from the town of Gregg. You've got the vice chair is Jeff Nellenbeck, who's from West Leiden. And then other members of that committee are Herb Frost, Vincent Nortz, and Barry Leindecker. The Finance and Rules Committee's goals are, like I said, not in any particular order, but the first is to establish a community engagement specialist position and develop a community engagement plan, including engagement with towns and villages. So that's something that we've recognized over the last couple of years that we need to do a better job engaging with the public, meeting them where they're at. I personally always thought we did rather well with traditional media. Nick and I have always been able, had a good relationship. We've worked well with 7 News and the Watertown Daily Times and Journal Republican. But, we have really kind of missed the boat, I think, a little bit on social media. And we've missed the boat on kind of making an effort to reach out to people and ask them for their input. So this position will help us coordinate those activities. So we'll get that up and running and have a plan that we'll present to the legislators hopefully this spring.
Very good.
The second goal is to work with economic development partners to clean up vacant properties, including specifically the reuse of the Lions Falls School and the Glenfield School. So at this point, the county does own the Glenfield School, obviously, but we have an agreement in place with the Rochester's Cornerstone Group to convert that into senior housing. We're waiting on state housing tax credits to be awarded for that project to move forward. But that's a big initiative. And then we have foreclosed finally on the Lions Falls School, which has really not paid taxes. And we could have foreclosed on that a long time ago, but you can't foreclose on something without a plan. So we finally have a plan. We've received grant funds from National Grid to help us clean that building up. It needs a lot of cleanup before it can be remarketed. And then of course there's the New York Forward Award that Lions Falls received last year. Some of that funding will hopefully go into that school so that we can clean it up. It's got great bones, it's got a great location. Once it's cleared and safe, naturally Lewis can market it and hopefully we can have a similar outcome to we had at Clemson.
So that's the plan, is for now that you have possession of the building, is to get it to the point where it's marketable and then you can sell it to somebody else, get it back on, possibly back on the
clean out all the debris, clean up all the mold, repair the roof and the basic, basically what we'd like is a secured shell structure that then we could market.
But it's not something that the county's looking at keeping long-term or anything like that?
Nope. Okay, continue broadband expansion program. Really this is one of the things that the legislators are, I think, most proud of. Over the last 4 years, we have reduced the amount of unserved homes in Lewis County by 70%. We have had amazing success with broadband expansion in Lewis County, and there's more work to be done. There's the Development Authority of the North Country just got a big grant that we're a part of. We are working with Frontier now for the first time. It's taken 4 years to get them to the table, but we are at the table with Frontier. So you folks that are on Frontier, or you're just a few houses down from where Frontier service ends, I think you can start I think that's about to change. We're going to start getting to some of you guys. Very good. That's got a lot of work that needs to continue. Explore options for bed tax collection. That's something that a lot of counties have done. This is an initiative that came from Treasurer Verkler, but hotels and motels charge bed tax.
Right.
It's a tourism tax that
Right.
goes to us directly to the Chamber of Commerce, and naturally Lewis in our case,
Right.
to support more tourism.
Right.
The problem is we've had a real growth in Airbnbs
Right.
and VRBOs,
Private rentals.
private rentals, that aren't necessarily playing by the same rules.
Right.
So our hope is to try to tighten that up and make sure that anybody that's in that industry is playing by the same rules, basically.
Right.
Number 5, enhance land use and taxation policies for electrical transmission infrastructure and solar development. It's no secret what the state of New York is doing. They are beefing up their electrical transmission capabilities. They're beefing up the grid, and they're doing that so that they can export more energy, clean energy, to other parts of the state.
Right.
So, that can be a development opportunity for Lewis County, but it also is a risk that we are not paying attention, and we look up one day and find that this landscape that we love is completely plastered with solar panels.
Right.
So there's a balance there, and we want to make sure that we have the best, most thoughtful, cutting-edge policy in the state of New York when it comes to solar and transmission. And quite honestly, I think we are. I mean, I think we are one of the communities that thinks about this more actively than a lot of places in New York State, and I think
Right.
that'll help us in the long run, for sure.
Right.
For sure. But there's more work to be done on that. Number 6, develop and codify employee appreciation initiatives. Lewis County's never been good on that. We've never been consistent on employee appreciation. We've got folks that retire with 40 years experience and they get a very good thank you, but it'd be nice if they got something from the board. It'd be nice if we really need to be much better at formalizing our employee appreciation. So
Yeah, definitely.
Putting together a policy and then making sure we follow that policy is something that the board is very interested in next year.
And that's something that just to throw it out there, we
Yeah.
would love to be a partner in
Yes.
something in the future if there's specific milestones that you
Mhm.
want to celebrate or things like that. Even if it's like a monthly thing. These people are celebrating 25 years. These people are celebrating 20 years.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. So.
Well, we have people with incredible work ethic that
Right.
work for us, and
Right.
they really bust their butts every day, and that's that Lewis County attitude of I work hard and get paid, and that's the exchange. But
Right,
really,
right.
there's more than that. We need to make sure that we're recognizing them, especially
Right.
the ones that really dedicate their lives to serving the community. So we're interested in pulling that together officially.
Very good.
Let's see. Implement county assessor and data collection. So the real property tax department has been authorized through the budget to add a county assessor position and a data collector position. So a lot of the towns are struggling to find assessors, and a lot of rural counties across New York State have started taking some assessment responsibilities in-house to the county.
Right.
So through this assessor and the data collector, we hope to offer a menu of options to towns,
Right.
where we can assist them in their assessment needs.
Right.
Because there's some towns that have fallen really far behind
Right.
on their assessment, and it's hard.
And at tax
to catch
times,
up.
it becomes really confusing to people to explain to people like tax rates and things like that because, when you work in the equalization rates and, some towns are on top of their assessments, others aren't, and then, you say, well, overall, there's, a 15% cut this year, but it completely, all 17 towns, it's a very different number, and
Yeah.
it depends on where their values are and things like
That's
that.
a great point,
So-
Nick. The county cut taxes. Our tax rate went down 16% to an historic low to basically 1996 tax levels. Okay.
Right.
But not everybody felt that because their assessments aren't up to date.
And I think there was 4 towns that because of the way the assessments were, their rate actually went up.
Right.
So
it's
it was confusing to people,
yes,
I guess was the big
and
thing.
it's hard. It's a complicated assessment. Real property tax assessment is not easy.
Right.
It's complicated. It takes a specialized person with specialized training to do
Right.
it, and it's becoming harder and harder to find those people.
Right.
Right here in Lewis County. So if the county government can have some resources available for the towns,
Right.
We think that's a good thing.
Right.
So we're getting that up and running as part of our goal for 2024.
Very good. And then any town that wants to, that needs assistance with that would be able to have access
Yes.
to.
Even
These people at the
data
county.
collection.
Right.
every time someone builds a new home, there's a building permit.
Right.
That permit goes to the assessor. They're
Right.
supposed to go out, verify it, and give it a value.
Right.
People would be maybe concerned to know that that doesn't always happen.
Right.
And so, keeping up that database is work in and of itself.
Right.
So, we can help with that.
Very good.
Regular updates for audit, budget, and health insurance. So this Finance and Rules Committee is the committee that works on the budget. They're the committee that works with our auditors, and they're the committee that helps determine health insurance decisions and rates. So keeping them informed on a regular basis obviously is critical. And then the last goal from this committee is to work with towns and villages to replace and expand water and sewer infrastructure. That's something that obviously the county does not own any water or sewer infrastructure,
Right.
but the towns and villages do.
Right.
We were able to help with the Southern Lewis Water Study,
Yep.
which basically identified all of the water needs in the southern end of the county. Then we did the same thing for the Central Lewis Water Study, with the
Yep.
exception of the village of Loudville, who declined to participate. All the governments in the Central Lewis were given basically an engineering report on all the capital projects that they need to
Right.
tackle. Turin is a great example. They took that report that said, here's what you need to do. We worked with them again to create what's called a preliminary engineering report, which is basically the first layer of engineering that you can use to submit for grant awards.
Right.
And they were awarded $4.8 million.
Right.
So that is an example of the county's role in water and sewer working perfectly.
Right.
We can help set the table. We can help use our expertise and staff. A lot of these places don't even have staff.
Right,
these
right,
villages, to write grants, set the table, and put these projects in motion. So we want to do more of that.
Right.
Because there's a lot of need out there. There's a lot of water and sewer infrastructure that was installed literally during the New Deal.
Right.
You're talking 1940s.
Right.
That has not been touched, or
Right.
earlier.
Right.
Or earlier than 1940. So anyway, that is our goal for that committee. So, plenty to keep the legislators busy. And we're appreciative of all their leadership driving these things forward.
Right.
To me, these are important things in the community, and I'm grateful that we have elected legislators that are willing to focus on these items.
Right. And I think it was just in the past few years that the committee started adopting their goals at the beginning
Yep.
of each year. So can you just talk a little bit about the importance of that? And basically, it kind of, like you said, it gives the focus, and you refer back to them at various points of the year, and you always bring them up at the last meeting of the year too,
Yeah.
to
Like
see
a
how you did.
scorecard.
Right.
So these are big, hairy items, problems sometimes, right? So I'm not saying we're going to solve the rural EMS issue in upstate New York,
Right.
but we can chip away at it.
Right.
And by formalizing these goals, by writing them down, basically the board is saying to the staff that we want to hold you accountable that we're working on these things.
Right.
And then the staff can say, okay, we now have the backing of the board to go work.
Right.
It's that symbiotic relationship. We need their authority in order to go work, and they need us to check back in.
Right.
And say, how's it going?
Right.
Where are we at with these things?
Right.
We said we were going to work on water. What have we really done this year?
Right.
So I think that it works quite well, and it allows us to focus on big problems in the community.
Right. And it kind of gives the community the big picture overall of what your priorities are this year.
Yeah.
And maybe this isn't the intention, but it also gives something to assess your representatives on at the end of the year too. You know what I mean? Like if you have the goals at the beginning of the year, these are our priorities.
Well, we do like a scorecard. I mean,
you
a
always
lot of
put it
these
up at
are
the last
are
meeting,
hold.
too.
A lot of these have come from 2023
Right.
forward. A lot of them have come from 2022.
Right.
22, 23, 24.
Right.
They're not things that you solve. There's things.
Right.
They're things you continue to chip away
Right.
at.
Right. Each
So
year
I
you
think
take
that's the goal.
specific steps
Right.
to.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned it, like, with your goal down here, it's kind of like how the bridge, you know what I mean? Like, grant writing is a very fine art.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, a lot of the towns and villages, if if you're not putting together a quality grant application, it's really hard to get the funding sometimes. So
Yeah.
sometimes, if you have somebody that's writing grant after grant and is familiar with how it works, and instead of getting rejected on the bridge funding, just a little bit of assistance with how to write the grant, and now 6 bridges are getting funded.
Well,
So-
and quite honestly, if we're being blunt, a lot of the state and federal agencies are hesitant to work with very small towns with no staff,
Right,
because they know the amount of paperwork and accountability there is.
right,
So there's nothing wrong, or the county should be stepping in to fill that gap and say, no, these towns are just as important as other bigger towns in New York State.
Right.
We can help be that staff.
Right.
We can help them navigate all the accountability and all the paperwork and all the funding,
Right.
For those things, and that's what we should be doing.
because that is an important aspect.
Yeah.
If you order a $4.8 million grant, they don't just hand over the money and that's the end of it. There's, like you said, there is so much involved with that. So for a village the size of Turin,
Who has
that can be quite
two-
complicated
two,
to
maybe
carry
one,
out.
1.5, 2 DPW
Right,
employees.
exactly.
That they don't have the administrative capacity
Right, so that's
to
a good
meet
point.
all of the requirements for a $5 million infrastructure grant. So those types of things, and I agree, it is about transparency, it's about accountability. Everybody in the community knows what we're going to be working on.
Right, very good.
These are the things, we've announced it, we've said it,
Right.
and now we're going to get to work.
Right.
So,
So for a pretty light agenda that did take a little while to discuss, but I think going through the goals is a very important part of that. So just a reminder for people that the board meeting is going to be on February 6th right here at the courthouse on I almost said Bostwick Street, but I'm thinking of the village office. So we're right here on State Street in
North
Lowville.
State Street, yeah.
Second floor, 5 p.m. the meeting starts. Public hearing on the community development block grants. The other items that you guys have going on this month, committees will meet again on February 20th.
Committee's always the third Tuesday of the month, starting at 1 o'clock.
Okay.
We run them back to
Back
back
to
to
back.
back. General Services, Human Services, Finance and Rules. Yeah, for now, that's
Anything
what we
else
got
on
going
the agenda this month?
I'm certain there is, but
Right.
not that I wrote down.
It's early in the month, so some things pop up as the
Right.
month goes on as well.
Right.
So,
Right.
all right, and like we said at the beginning, this is something that we're going to bring this back as a regular segment every month. So prior to the March board meeting, we'll be back in here again, and we'll do it all over again.
Absolutely.
All right. Anything else that you wanted to add this month?
No, I
Ryan?
appreciate your time, Nick, and thanks. Anybody that takes the time to watch these videos, we appreciate it, and look forward to doing more of them this year.
All right. Well, thanks, Ryan, and thanks for your time today.
Thank you.